In this video, we're going to look at how to summarize a quantitative variable using SAS. So there's three files. You'll want to make sure you know where they are. There is the SAS script, and so this is available on Canvas. You'll want to make sure that you have access to the code book, as well as the data set for your state. Now, of course, if you'd like to follow along with what I'm doing in the video, you'll also want the data set for Kentucky. So the very first thing we are going to do is we're going to use the proc import statement to read in our data. Now remember, if you're using the import wizard, you do not want to run this code. I'm going to be naming the dataset Kentucky 2020 BRFSS. So as a reminder, if you are if you're using the import wizard, you'll want to make sure that you name the member Kentucky 2020 BRFSS to be able to follow along. All right, so we're going to run this. Always want to make sure it looks like my data was read in correctly. You'll notice here that we have 2,869 observations and 279 variables, which is what I would expect. Next, we're going to look at the variable sleep time 1. So before we do that, let's go and look in the codebook. So as a reminder, in the codebook, you can always hit Control F to look for different variables. So here I'm looking for sleep time 1, and here is the information on that variable. So note this variable takes the values 1 through 24 to represent the number of hours of sleep. It also takes the values 77 and 99. 77 and 99 really represent categories, so if we're going to summarize this variable as a quantitative variable, we do need to first remove those categories. So that's what we're going to do next. So this will be very similar to what we did last time. I'm going to use a data step to do that. I'm going to start out with my Kentucky data set. Set just basically means I'm copying it over. Then I'm going to create a new variable called sleep underscore hours because we're going to have a variable that just records the hours. I'm going to set it equal to sleep time 1. Now from here there are a couple different ways I could write the next two lines. One way that we saw last time where the two values that I want to get rid of were 77 and 99. So I could write two separate lines, one for if sleep hour is equal to 77 and one if sleep hour is equal to 99. Another option would be, notice that really I only want values from 1 to 24. Anything greater than 24 I know can't represent the number of hours in a day, so I could just get rid of everything greater than 24, which would take care of the 77s and 99s in a single line. So to do that, I'm going to have if sleep, and then instead of equal, I've got GT, which stands for greater than 24. I want to set sleep hour equal to missing. This will add in that new variable. And now what we can do is we can use the proc mean statement and the proc univariate statement to help us look at and summarize that new sleep hour variable. So running the proc means, what this is going to give us is the number of observations. So notice once we got rid of the 77s and the 99s, this variable has 2,819 observations. Here is the mean, the standard deviation, and the minimum and the maximum. If we run proc univariate, we would get even more information. Some of this we've covered and some of it we haven't, but notice here we have the median and the mode. We have the variance, we have the range, here's the IQR. So this basic statistical measures, this is, we've seen all of these in the notes. Down here in the quantiles, we could also get our maximum, our minimum, our median. It also gives us Q1 and Q3. We're going to ignore the extreme observations for right now. And then it also tells us the number of missing. Now we do want to be careful here because we did set all the 77s and the 99s equal to missing. So kind of hidden in there is the fact that some of those were the 77s and 99s. So it's not a bad idea, just like we did in Module 6 rather, for the original sleep variable, the sleep time 1, to run a proc freak to figure out how many 77s and 99s were removed so that you can include that in your report. Next, we can create a box plot Again, we're going to use proc SGplot, similar to what we did before, but instead of calling hist, we're going to call vbox, which will create the box plot. And here is our box plot. You'll notice here in the title, I have included the number of observations that go into creating this plot. I've added in the title and then the Y label as hours. Now, often when we're looking at summarizing a quantitative variable, we're not just interested in summarizing the quantitative variable by itself, but really what we'd like to do is to summarize that quantitative variable for two levels of a categorical variable. So let's look at an example how we could do this. So here we're going to still look at that quantitative variable for sleep time, but we're also going to look at the categorical variable flu shot. And we're going to focus on whether or not someone received their flu shot. And so let's go and look at that variable in the codebook. Now we might have to hit next until we find the actual page that defines the variable. And so notice that the flu shot variable takes 4 values, 1 for yes, 2 for no, and 7 and 9 represent the refused and the don't knows. So we're particularly interested in summarizing the sleep time for those that did and did not get the flu shot. I apologize if you can hear my dog in the background. All right, so how can we do this? Well, the first thing is let's use proc_freq to just look at that flu shot variable. And so down here we have the frequencies for both the yeses and the nos, and we also see that flu shot had 115 missing values. Next, we can make a table that compares sleep time and flu shot. And to do this, in the proc_freq statement, we include both the sleep time star and then the flu shot variable. And here is that table comparing the two. So we can see if we look at the yeses and the nos for flu shots, that is going to be these two columns, and so we'll get the sleep time for each of those. All right. Next, we want to remove the responses for those that refuse to answer and the unknown variables for sleep time. So this is pretty much the exact same thing that we've already done, but we're including it here just as a good reminder that we will have to do this. So again, just like before, I created that sleep hour variable. So now what I can do is call the proc univariate statement again. I'm still going to call the sleep hour variable, but now I've added in this new line up above that's called class. Next to class is where you put your categorical variable. So running this, SAS is going to do is it's going to create a new page for each of the levels of flu shot. So this is flu shot 9, flu shot 7, flu shot 2, and flu shot 1. And each of these pages are going to look like the univariate page that you saw for the full sleep variable, but now it's going to summarize sleep times for each of the levels of flu shot. So for everyone that got the flu shot, and we can see there was 1,349 people, these are the basic summaries for sleep time. So on average, we can see that those 1,349 people who got the flu shot slept an average of 7 hours. For those that didn't get the flu shot, they slept again approximately an average of 7 hours. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to create a box plot that compares side by side the sleep time for those that got the flu shot and those that didn't. In order to do that, we will need to remove the responses from flu shot that are not yeses and nos. So in other words, the 7s and the 9s. So to do this, very similar to what we had before, we're going to use a data step, start with our data set, set our data set. Then we're going to create a flu shot 7 underscore no miss because we're going to get rid of the refusals, the don't knows. So we could call this no refusal just like before. We're going to set it equal to that original variable flu shot 7. Now this looks a little different than what you did before. You could pretty much do what you did before, but this is just another option. So what this is going to do is it's going to say if the tilde means not. So if flu shot 1 is not equal to 1 or 2, then I want to set it to missing. So in other words, this is setting everything not 1 and 2 equal to missing. So we run this, and then we can create our side-by-side box plots. So let's look at what some of the options were for these side-by-side flu shots, or side-by-side box plots rather. So we call in our data set. This line right here is new. Since we're comparing two different box plots, we want to tell it X values and values to display. So the X values represent the two values that flu shot takes. So it can take a 1 or a 2. The values displayed are what we would actually like to show up on the plot. So when flu shot is equal to 1, I want to display a yes, and here I put in the number of observations that correspond to the yeses. When flu shot's equal to 2, I want to put in a no and the number of observations that correspond to the no. We still have the V box with sleep hours because we want to make a box plot for sleep hours, but then we have slash category and that new flu shot variable. So in other words, this is going to split the box plots by the categories for this variable. Here we have the title, here we have the label, and here we have the label for hours. So as always, if you have any questions over the code, please let me know.